Welcome, and thank you for joining the CFS online training. I am Karen Blako, and in this module, we will cover the 7 steps of effective wet sanitation. By the end of this module, we want to make sure you understand the 7 steps of wet sanitation and the importance of a sequenced sanitation process, whilst always continuing to comply to the appropriate GMP policies. First of all, I would like to provide you with the whole overview of the 7 steps, as this shows the sequence, which is very important for the sanitation to be effective. We start with step 1, secure, disassemble and dry clean. Step 2, an in-sink top-down pre-rinse. Step 3, apply detergent and scrub. Step 4, a post-rinse and self-inspection. Step 5, prepare for the formal inspection, and then step 6, a post-sanitation or pre-op inspection. And lastly, step 7, sanitize or disinfect and reassemble the equipment. First of all, we always need to work safely and disconnect the power on equipment when it is required using the lockout-tagout procedure. We will need to prepare our area, like removing all materials and ingredients and taking it to the warehouse or storage, as well as dispose of all waste. It is very important to always follow the GMP rules throughout all the steps of sanitation. Any sensitive components like electrical cabinets, control panels, etc. will need to be sanitized and covered. Once we have done that, we can start to remove gross debris from the parts that are directly accessible, and disassemble any parts like catch pans or motor housing or some framework to create more access to the equipment whilst continuing to pick up gross debris. Disassembling parts creates accessibility to the whole equipment, which we need to be able to effectively wet clean the equipment. We will need to follow the SSOP for which parts we need to disassemble and how. To prevent cross-contamination from the floor to any part of the equipment, especially food contact surfaces, we want to make sure we store any of the disassembled parts appropriately. Let's have a look at the video and learn. Sensitive components need to be protected during wet sanitation. They need to be covered, and before we cover them, we need to make sure they are sanitized to prevent any contamination after the cover is removed. Let's watch a video. After removing all gross debris, we will start with the first rinse to get rid of most of the visible debris. The temperature of the rinse water should be suitable for the soil that needs to be removed, making sure it's a couple of degrees above the melting temperature of the food soil. When rinsing, it is important to wash top down, to flush all debris down and not recontaminating a surface due to the rinse water running down over a previously already rinsed surface. During the rinse step, also rinse the surrounding environment. Make sure to use squeegees and shovels to remove rinsed off debris from the floor. This is to reduce debris going into the drains. If the drain baskets do fill up with soil, it is important to empty these baskets before the next steps. Always take into account to change GMP after touching drains. When rinsing, be mindful where you store the spray nozzle to prevent any contamination from the floor to a product contact surface. So let's watch the video and learn. Before we start our foaming step and start using chemicals, we need to make sure we prepare well. The first thing is people safety by using the proper PPE. Then we need to set up the foam applicator, which can be a mobile or a wall unit. In all cases, we need to titrate the concentration of chemicals and make sure the detergent has the right concentration and the equipment is functioning. Once we start foaming, we need to take into consideration to sequence the foaming from the bottom to the top. This is opposite of what we do when we rinse. First foam the floor and walls and last the equipment. And we make sure when we foam the equipment, we also use the bottom to top sequence. Foaming from the bottom to top allows us to see where we have applied the foam, and all surfaces are covered by the fresh foam with the right concentration to be most effective. Once the foam has been applied, we need to make sure to scrub with the appropriate color-coded tools. For example, brushes or one-time use scrub pads. Using the tools will give the mechanical action needed to loosen the soil of the surface. It's important to start scrubbing after the detergent has had the minimal contact time as per the supplier recommendation, and not to let the foam dry. Dried foam will leave a film on the surface that is not removed with regular rinsing. During the foaming, it is the right time to clean the drains, and this needs to happen every routine clean. The foam that is on the floor will create a barrier for any overspray from the drain cleaning. For any drain cleaning, it is very important to use dedicated tools that are of a different color to any other tool and are marked clearly for drain cleaning only. The brush to clean the inside of the drain should have a small brush head and a long handle, and use gentle pressure to minimize overspray. Preferably, there's a dedicated person who will clean the drains, and dedicated PPE must be worn. The dedicated tools should be cleaned and sanitized prior to storing them. The post-rinsing will follow the same sequence as the pre-rinse, from the floor to the wall to equipment and top down. It's important to use low pressure and not exceed 10 bar or 150 psi during this step. This is to prevent recontamination through overspray. After we finish rinsing, we will perform a self-inspection. For an effective inspection, tools like flashlights and a checklist are important. When we inspect equipment, we should also inspect the entire surrounding area. And if we find any food debris or soil during the self-inspection, we will need to re-clean and document the finding as well as the corrective action on the checklist. Before we hand the equipment or line over to the pre-op inspection, we need to make sure the room is ready for the formal inspection by removing any pooling water and condensation, and cleaning and sanitizing any tools that need to be used for reassembling the equipment. During the post-sanitation or pre-op inspection, the inspector needs to wear the appropriate GMP to protect the equipment and not introduce any contamination. The inspector will need to be trained on how and where to inspect the equipment, using appropriate tools like a flashlight or a stainless steel mirror for the visual inspection, as well as a checklist. In this part, we can also use verification tools like ATP swabbing, allergen swabbing, or micro swabbing like APC. Again, just like during the self-inspection, it's important to inspect the entire surrounding area. During the inspection, if any food debris or soil is found, or we have an out-of-spec ATP, or failed allergen swabs, we will need to re-clean and document the finding as well as the corrective action on the checklist. After the inspection, we will need to sanitize the parts and equipment before reassembling, and depending on the local regulation and sanitizer used, we will need to rinse the sanitizer. Based on the equipment part or surface, we will need to choose the appropriate sanitizing method, like wiping or a foam and rinse. Before assembling the equipment, we will need to change to new or clean GMP or PPE and follow the steps in the SSOP for reassembly. Any tools that we have used for sanitation and reassembly will need to be cleaned and sanitized before placing them back into the storage. Let's recap what we have covered during this module. It's important to have a step-by-step and sequenced approach to wet cleaning to have an effective sanitation process. It's like climbing the stairs. If you run up the stairs and you skip steps, there's a higher risk of tripping and falling. It's important not to trip and fall and to go through the process step by step. During the process, it's important to always follow the GMP rules and change GMPs between the cleaning step and inspection and sanitizing step to prevent cross-contamination after cleaning. Thanks everyone for watching and listening. I hope you can apply your learnings into your daily job going forward. If you want to learn more, you can connect with us using the information shown on the slide.